The sharper a person's intellect grows, the more isolated they might find themselves. This isn't some random twist of fate, or a deliberate decision on their part. Smart folks often drift away from the social scene not because they're shy or stuck up. Instead, they pick up on things most people don't even notice, a point Carl Jung highlighted way back when. This truth can feel a little uncomfortable. The deeper someone dives into their own thoughts, the tougher it gets for them to join in on small talk, hang out in social circles, or even keep up with relationships. Take some of history's big names: Albert Einstein, Nikola Tesla, Arthur Schopenhauer. They all steered clear of the bustling social life. But does that mean a person's doomed to be a loner forever? Or could it be that these brilliant minds saw solitude as a golden ticket to personal growth and intellectual breakthroughs? Society's always been a bit wary of people who step back from the crowd. Those who distance themselves often get labeled as odd, aloof, or even troubled. But what if that view's off the mark? History suggests plenty of great thinkers didn't see loneliness as a burden, they embraced it like a gift. While most folks go out of their way to avoid being alone, some figured out its fertile ground for creativity and deep thinking. Arthur Schopenhauer was one of the first to say it outright. For him, solitude was the natural companion of exceptional minds. He believed genius doesn't thrive in a noisy crowd. Those with refined, complex thoughts need space to breathe. To him, quiet moments weren't just nice. They were sacred soil where groundbreaking ideas could sprout. He even argued that a calm, simple life with plenty of alone time sparks the creative spirit. Now, he didn't completely shun human connection, but he knew the power of stepping back to reflect deeply. Then there's Nikola Tesla, another standout example. He dodged traditional relationships and anything that might pull him away from his work. Tesla felt constant chit-chat, and socializing drained his energy, keeping him from the stuff that really mattered, his inventions. Was his isolation a choice he made, or did his mind just race so far ahead of his time that he couldn't help it? That's worth chewing on. When someone retreats into their thoughts like that, solitude can turn into a playground for creativity and self-discovery. But here's the flip side. If that isolation comes from feeling misunderstood or disconnected from others, it might build a wall that blocks meaningful bonds and stunts growth. For great minds, solitude isn't always a win. The line between brilliance and being totally cut off is thinner than you'd think. If society pushes away those who think differently, is going solo really a choice, or just the only path left for someone who doesn't fit the mold? Truth is, some people thrive surrounded by friends and laughter, while others crave the peace of a quiet corner. Carl Jung dug into this split early on, breaking down the chase between introverts and extroverts. Extroverts get their juice from the outside world. They love lively debates, buzzing environments, and feel energized bouncing ideas off others. Introverts, though? They recharge by looking inward, needing silence and alone time to sort through their thoughts and reset. Why are some people wired this way? It might come down to how their brains handle information. Those who think analytically or love to reflect need extra time to process ideas and connect the dots. Quick, shallow chats might be fun for some, but to a sharp mind, they can feel empty and exhausting. Introverts crave exchanges that go deep, real conversations where ideas actually spark and grow. Trouble is, society's obsessed with extroversion from day one. We're taught young that being outgoing, loud, and chatty equals success. Quiet kids get nudged to open up, and grown-up introverts are often seen as timid or lacking charm. But that take misses something big. Some of the most powerful minds in history drew their strength from stillness. Jung warned against forcing yourself to act against your true nature. It's a recipe for trouble. When an introvert tries to squeeze into an extrovert's way of living, they're flirting with burnout. Their mind just isn't wired for a non-stop flood of outside noise and action. How someone sees themselves plays a huge role in this tug-of-war. Once a person gets comfortable with who they are, guilt-free, they handle external pressures a lot better. Choosing solitude doesn't mean they're socially awkward. It's more about their energy flowing inward instead of spilling out everywhere. That might explain why so many brilliant minds leaned into self-reflection as their go-to path, not because they hated people, but because they knew deep thinking needs a quiet space free from distractions buzzing around them. In most cases, a sharp intellect carves out a gap between a person and the folks around them. People with keen minds tend to dive into big questions, niche passions, and ways of seeing the world that not many others get, and that can make casual hangouts tricky. Finding someone who matches their level of curiosity feels like hunting for a needle in a haystack. Everyday chats usually spin around the same old stuff: weather updates, what's on TV, or random life details. And for someone with a restless, analytical brain, that kind of back and forth can get old fast, almost boring. Here's the catch: these folks don't ditch social scenes because they look down on others. They just rarely stumble across talks that light up their minds. Studies back this up. People with high IQs often prefer keeping their social circle small, and it's not about being snooty or antisocial. It's more like a mental mismatch, when someone realizes their thoughts don't quite line up with what's normal. They might feel a little out of place. That odd one-out vibe often nudges them toward quiet over disappointing small talk. They'd rather hold out for real, meaty conversations. People with strong analytical skills set the bar high for what counts as a good chat. They're not here for flimsy opinions or surface-level fluff. They're after discussions that stretch their thinking, spark fresh ideas, and broaden how they see the world. The trade-off for that kind of brilliance? Loneliness sometimes sneaks in, not because they lock themselves away on purpose, but because the world doesn't always serve up the connection they're craving. So, for them, stepping back into solitude isn't just a preference, it's a shield against mental overload. Highly intellectual types often pick up on their surroundings with extra sensitivity. Too much noise, crowded rooms, forced chit-chat, it all wears them out fast. That overload doesn't just sap their energy. It can push their brain to the brink of exhaustion. Their minds are always on, sifting through info, spotting patterns, making connections. While some folks can gab away for hours without blinking, those with a razor-sharp awareness need downtime to sort their thoughts and dodge emotional burnout. Carl Jung dug into this link between smarts and sensitivity, pointing out that the more aware someone becomes, the heavier the world's weight feels on their shoulders. Deep self-reflection makes a person more tuned in to everything happening around them. It's especially clear with hypersensitive types, a trait you'll often spot in intuitive, thoughtful people. They don't just watch the world go by. They soak it in, catching every emotion, every shift in tone, every subtle vibe that slips past most folks. That heightened awareness can be a superpower, letting them understand people and situations on a whole other level. But here's the downside: that same gift can flood their system with too much input. Their mental radar never switches off, picking up emotional signals and sensory details nonstop, which is why long stints in loud groups or shallow talks leave them wiped out. Beyond the emotional toll, there's a physical side too. Research shows hypersensitive people have nervous systems that kick into overdrive with everyday stuff. Loud sounds, bright lights, or a barrage of interactions hit them harder than most. While most folks breeze through everyday noise and chatter without breaking a sweat, those with heightened sensitivity crash hard after social gatherings. They need way more time to recharge. It's not just a physical thing either. The mental strain of keeping up with society's fast pace can weigh them down like a ton of bricks. A lot of them feel this constant push to join in on interactions that clash with how they're naturally built. When they pull back to save their energy, people often peg them as distant, icy, or just not caring, and that snap judgment stirs up a tug-of-war inside them. They're torn between meeting everyone's expectations and honoring their deep need for quiet time. That clash gets old fast, and the emotional drain from too much socializing often leaves them with no choice but to step away. It's not that they don't care about others. It's more about protecting their mental well-being, because faking a social mask all the time would mean running themselves into the ground. That's why figuring out this pattern matters so much. It's the key to dodging total isolation. For hypersensitive folks, it's all about setting smart boundaries, knowing when to retreat and regroup without letting that distance turn into a permanent hideout. Respecting their own rhythm is a must, and there's nothing wrong with craving silence to sort out their thoughts. But how do you balance that with a world obsessed with being on all the time? Society loves the spotlight, fast talks, endless connections, showing up everywhere, and it measures success by how many people you know or how often you're out there mingling. That setup doesn't click for everyone, though. For those who see life through a deeper lens, the pressure to always be available can feel downright suffocating. Keeping up shallow chats or forcing smiles and pointless conversations. That's a recipe for mental exhaustion. There's this big misconception floating around that quieter, reflective types are antisocial or secretly down in the dumps, that they need constant interaction to feel okay. Truth is, society's been hyping up extroversion as the gold standard since we were kids. Little ones get praised for being loud and chatty, nudged to come out of their shell. And at work, the talkers who put themselves out there often look like the sharpest tools in the shed, even if they're not. That vibe creates a real struggle for introspective folks. Trying to fit that mold can leave them emotionally wiped out. Some thinkers, like Arthur Schopenhauer, saw right through it. He argued most social ties are surface level, and only a handful of people can keep up a conversation worth having. To him, chasing self-awareness meant carving out alone time, because silence lets you really hear your own mind without all the outside noise butting in. Being different from the crowd doesn't make you wrong. Everyone's got their own way of rolling with the world, and there's no shame in loving your own company, as long as it doesn't spiral into shutting everyone out. The real trick might not be about squeezing into society's playbook, but about owning who you are without feeling bad about it. So, are people who pick solitude missing out, or are they just guarding their energy in a world that demands a lot but doesn't always give much back? Being alone doesn't mean you're lost. Chosen solitude can feel like a wide open space, a safe spot where your mind can stretch out without anything getting in the way. Society tends to lump loneliness with being cut off, but that's not the full picture. People who carve out time for themselves aren't always turning their backs on the world. They're just building a cozy nook for reflection and growth. Quiet moments hand you a rare chance to think clearly, free from all the distractions swirling around. In that stillness, you can watch your thoughts unfold, get a handle on your feelings, and zero in on what really matters to you. Here's the reworked fourth part of your story, translated into English and tailored for an American audience. Each sentence has been restructured with varied phrasing, expanded for depth, and crafted in a conversational tone suitable for AI narration and YouTube's advertiser-friendly guidelines. This journey lays the groundwork for anyone chasing inner growth. It's a chance to dig into who you are without everyone else's expectations crowding in. Solitude acts like a spark for creativity, but it's when you mix it with just the right amount of human connection that ideas really start to breathe and take shape. Too much noise and socializing can scatter your thoughts into a million pieces. On the flip side, a mind that gets enough quiet time sees things more clearly, paving the way for fresh, game-changing concepts. There's an even deeper layer to being alone, though. It hands you the freedom to be yourself, no approval required. So many people spend their days tweaking themselves to fit in, but learning to hang out with your own thoughts teaches you that real acceptance starts from within. That's the road Carl Jung called individuation, a process that guides each person toward fully embracing their one-of-a-kind self. Stepping back from the world's chaos isn't about dodging reality. It's more like carving out a space where you can grow freely, unbothered by pointless distractions. But here's the catch: that freedom only shines when solitude's a choice. If it creeps in because of fear or letdown, it can trap you like a cage instead of launching you forward. That's why it's crucial to tell the difference between loneliness and isolation. One's a state of feeling whole inside, while the other's a mirror of pain and disconnection. The real magic lies in striking a balance, cherishing those moments of self-reflection without cutting all ties to the world. Use alone time to sharpen your mind, get a grip on your emotions, and rethink what you're aiming for, but don't let it turn into a habit of shutting everyone out. True freedom isn't about how many people are around you, it's about being at peace with yourself, whether you're solo or surrounded. Going it alone can feel like a breath of fresh air, but it can also weigh you down if it's not handled right. Solitude might be a deliberate move, or it could sneak up as an accidental drift, and that difference decides whether it lifts you up or drags you under. When someone chooses to step away, maybe to think, learn, create, or just tidy up their headspace, that's voluntary isolation, driven by a hunger to know themselves better. It's a healthy kind of alone time where they're perfectly fine keeping their own company. But then there's the flip side, harmful isolation, where someone pulls back because they feel misunderstood or pushed away. Instead of being a safe haven for growth, that kind of retreat builds walls that block out meaningful bonds. So how do you figure out if solitude's doing you good or holding you back? Look at how it hits your emotions and mental state. If being alone brings clarity, calm, and a creative buzz, you're probably on the right track. But if it stirs up sadness, apathy, or a hollow ache, it might be time to shake things up. Another big clue is timing. Short breaks from the crowd can recharge you, but stretching it out too long without any human connection can mess with your head. Going without real relationships might leave you emotionally stranded, making it tough to jump back into the mix. That's why finding a middle ground between solitude and socializing is so key. It's okay to honor your need for quiet without guilt tripping over society's rules. Just don't let it sever every thread to the outside world. Growth doesn't just happen in your own head, it blooms through swapping ideas with others too. The challenge isn't about dodging loneliness altogether, it's about using it smartly. Not every loner's a genius, and not every smart person's a loner, but there's definitely a tide between deep thinking and stepping away. A mind that loves to analyze needs room to stretch. Constant chatter and repetitive hangouts can scatter its focus. That's where solitude turns into a must-have for anyone looking to sharpen their intellect. But does serious reflection really need you to go solo? It all boils down to balancing your inner world with the outer one. People who give themselves those quiet pockets can organize their thoughts better, ponder without interruptions, and feed their creative spark. Time alone becomes a launch pad for intellectual growth, letting you think freely without anyone else's input steering the wheel. The tricky part is when that step back turns into a permanent retreat. It's tempting to think solitude's the only road for anyone hunting knowledge or growth. Some folks even start dodging social scenes not by choice, but because they're fed up, convinced the outside world's got nothing worth their time. That's one of the biggest pitfalls of staying isolated too long. You can lose touch with reality. When someone's cooped up in their own bubble for ages, they miss out on bouncing their ideas off others, which is how you sharpen your thinking through real back and forth. Carl Jung flagged this risk early on. He championed digging into yourself but stressed that growing as a person hinges on blending that inner reflection with outer connection. Go too far into isolation, and your mind can stiffen up, shutting out fresh ideas and tricking you into believing solitude's the only way forward. Another trap? It's easy to start feeling above it all, like you're too smart for the room. When someone pulls away because they can't find a conversation that clicks, they might slide into thinking no one out there has anything worthwhile to say. That mindset just digs the hole deeper, cutting them off from perspectives that could actually add something valuable. So how do you dodge these snags? It starts with realizing intellectual depth doesn't have to mean ditching simple human moments. Not every chat needs to be a brainbuster to matter. Even laid-back talks can shed light on how others see the world. Being present in those moments without always expecting a deep debate can make them more enjoyable and even eye-opening. Another angle? Actively seek out places where big ideas get tossed around. Joining groups or communities that vibe with your interests can make a difference. And these days, with tech and info at our fingertips, it's easier than ever to find spots where people geek out over critical thinking, creativity, or reflection. When you're in a crowd that gets your wavelength, talking feels natural and real, no compromise required. That nagging sense that no one's worth chatting with? It's more about how you approach people than a legit shortage of sharp minds nearby. Asking the right questions, showing real curiosity about what others think, and stepping outside your mental comfort zone can turn even casual exchanges into something meaningful. It's not just the gaps in how we see the world that teach us. It's the clash of different ways of thinking that really lights a spark. Plus, juggling self-reflection with social time keeps you from frying your brain or locking yourself away too tight. Alone time's clutch for sorting your headspace and diving into ideas, but it's through connecting with others that those thoughts get tested and toughened up. Knowing when to retreat for some mental clarity and when to ease into lighter chats, without demanding every convo be profound, gives you room to roll with the world more smoothly. Smarts shouldn't drive a wedge between you and people, They should be a tool to glide between all kinds of interactions with ease. Figuring out how to feed your need for big thoughts while still enjoying simpler moments might just be the secret sauce to a life that feels full, where solitude's your buddy, not your boss. Personal growth boils down to how you wield that alone time. It's gotta be a booster for your mind, not a hideout from everything else. Those solo stretches should fuel your brain, organize your ideas, and deepen what you know, not shrink your world down. Deep thinking isn't just about going it alone, it's about balancing that inward focus with ties to the outside. A sharp mind might need quiet to stretch its legs, but it's the push and pull of talking, facing challenges, and soaking in new experiences that keep it growing. At the end of the day, solitude shouldn't feel like a lockup. It's a wide open space where your mind can breathe, recharge, and step back into the world with sharper eyes. Being brainy doesn't mean swearing off social stuff. It's about knowing when to dip out for a breather and when to jump into the mix. Alone time can weigh you down or lift you up, depending on how you handle it. If there's one takeaway here, it's this: pulling back from the crowd isn't about turning your back on life. It's often just a response to craving deeper reflection and a chance to grow into yourself. Some of history's sharpest minds found solitude to be rich soil where their ideas could take root and ripen. But it was through sharing those thoughts with the world that they truly sprang to life. Silence, far from being a void, often turns out to be the perfect breeding ground for creativity and figuring yourself out. Still, locking yourself away too much can trip you up. When someone totally cuts off the outside, they risk drifting out of touch with what's real and missing out on lessons that only come from mixing it up with others. That's why keeping things balanced is so clutch, carving out space for reflection while staying open to chats and connections. The big question isn't whether smart folks dodge social scenes altogether, it's why they pull back in the first place. It's not always a game plan they've mapped out. Sometimes it's just their gut response to a world that feels too loud, too rushed, or too stuck on the surface. The tide between going solo and being brainy runs deeper than most people realize, and getting a handle on that push and pull is key to living a life that feels true to you. The way society loves to roll, always on, always connected, doesn't fit everyone like a glove, and learning to honor your own need for quiet and deep thinking can unlock a real sense of freedom and crystal clear headspace. If there's one thing to stick in your mind, it's this: don't shy away from solitude. It can be a trusty sidekick. Setting aside time to be alone lets you zero in, get to know yourself better, and build more genuine bonds with the people around you. So here's my nudge for you: take these ideas and run with them in your own life. Pay attention to those moments when you're by yourself. Think about how they shape the way you process things, see the world, and act day to day. Strike that sweet spot between looking inward and reaching out, and you'll see how it can add some serious richness to your journey.